This video is part 2 of a little series that I'm doing on the different types and categories of spreads that I typically use in my monthly setups of my bullet journal. So I want to show you my financial spreads and speak a little more in detail about how I use them. There are surely many ways to do financial planning or financial tracking, and I just wanted to share with you my way of doing it. And this is just the way how I developed it over months, just finding out what worked best for me, what didn't work. And what you see by now is the outcome of this development and how I use it by now, but this will surely also change in the future. In March, I originally wanted to travel back to Germany, but because of the current situation with the coronavirus, I had to cancel my travel, and to balance that out, I decided for a travel theme for April. Under the current circumstances, traveling should be avoided where it's possible, and please stay home whenever it's possible for you. Usually, I like to use stickers for the headers of the month and all the different spreads, basically. But for the travel theme, I actually wanted to get the airmail look with blue and red, so I decided that I would just write out the headers myself. And I decided for this font that you see me using here, that doesn't always turn out perfectly, but as I'm using it, I'm getting better at it, I would say. And I'm not thriving for perfection here. This is supposed to give me fun. So I am happy with how it turned out. As I set up the trackers for the month, you see me a little bit confused here on whether the month of April has 30 or 31 days. So I counted it on the knuckles of my hand. This is a little trick that I'd learned as a child. Each time you count a knuckle, it means the month has 31 days, and each time you count between the knuckles, it means that the month has only 30 days. On a knuckle, we have January, February, March, April, June on a knuckle, July on a knuckle, September, October, and so on and so forth. So counting for April, I realized that the month is in between knuckles and therefore has only 30 days. The music, by the way, is by a band called LONGWAY HAZEL, and the name of the song is very fittingly Corona. I will link their YouTube channel down below in case you want to check it out. As I write down the little headers for my trackers, I can tell you that I put up 4 daily trackers and 1 weekly tracker. And 4 daily trackers means that I actually added a new tracker that I was thinking that I wanted to have. But suddenly when I set up the spread, I completely forgot about what the new tracker was. So I had to leave it blank, and hopefully it will come to my mind later, so I can add it. I'm very happy for the opportunity to use the sticky note with the nautical map in the background and the whale, because I find it very beautiful, and I ordered it a few weeks ago and finally I have an opportunity to use it. And as you can see, I also decided to go with stamps this time, not only with stickers, to have not only a different style of decoration this month, but also because this is just a great opportunity to use some of the great travel stems that I could not stop myself buying and have never used so far. Now with the red header and the blue header, I hope that the airmail style that I wanted to achieve comes out well. In my last video for my monthly setup of March, I talked about how I use this monthly overview spread that you watch me setting up right now. So I wanted to go back to it to show you the way how I ended up using it throughout the March. So you can see at the trackers, you can see that we're like in the middle of March, or a little more than the middle as I am filming this. So on the left side, I have the trackers and the most important events. And on the right side, I have a monthly to-do list. I have a little section for finances. Then I set up a little section for my Germany trip that has been canceled now. And I have a section for the university stuff. And in the little soon section, I already noted down some things that are important for April. If you're interested to see my March setup, I'll leave a link down below. Now let's move on to the financial spread. In my last video, I have already mentioned that the organization of all the money related stuff was something that I was never particularly good at, and that was an incentive to me to try out the bullet journal in the first place. Of course, I had always made sure to pay my rent and the big important things. But aside from these major things, I didn't have much overview about how I spent my money in everyday life. I lived more in the way that I would spend my money if I had some, and I wouldn't spend it if I didn't have some. So instead of planning ahead, I was more reacting to the state of my account. This was never a major problem, but I had the impression that I was spending money on unimportant things, or I just didn't know what I spent my money on. And I just wanted to have more control over this and just know what I spend money on, so that in case I want to change things, I would know where to start with that. Therefore, my financial spread is not that much about financial planning or budgeting, but it's rather a tracker. After finishing to write out the header, I realized that on the right hand side there is a lot of space, which makes the header seem a little bit misplaced. And I tried to solve this with just putting a decoration into the empty space, so it looks like as if that is how I planned to do it in the first place. And I think it didn't come out too bad. So to give you an idea on how I use my finance spread, I wanted to show you the way how I use it in March. Now, I like to document my spendings in 4 categories that I found to be the main categories that I typically spend money on. So these are food, that means eating out, coffee, because I would just buy a lot of coffee, transportation, and others. Now, as you can see, my record for March is pretty empty, and typically I would fill up all the space with food and coffee. But first, the month isn't over yet, and second, I spent a lot of time at home due to the current corona situation and just did not spend as much money on food as I typically do. Therefore, I decided to also show you my finance tracker of February that gives you a better idea of how my finance tracker usually looks like. So I have food, coffee, other, and transportation, where I just record how much I spend on each category, and at the end of the month I add up all my expenses according to categories down here. So food, coffee, transportation. I also have Amazon and others. so that I can see how much I spend on what. And I also add up my entire expenses of the month and hold it against my entire income of the month. And that gives me a number of how much I saved or overspent in the month. Alright, so this is how I record my spendings. I don't do budgeting yet, but I would like to try that out in the future as well. Now returning back to my April finance spread, I continued with writing out the headers for the different categories, but in adjusting the categories for my financial tracking to my current reality, so to speak, I added not only food for eating out, but also groceries, as that will become more important next month. And I also reduced the space for food and coffee, which are just things that I use when I'm at work and not at home. But we will all spend a lot of time at home in April. Maybe you ask yourself why I am so meticulously keeping record of my spendings and what exactly I spend it on. But for me, it was important to understand my habits. And I actually do want to not spend too much money on things that I think are unimportant. Not only regarding saving money, but also regarding consuming in general and just having a more sustainable life. Sustainability is also a motivation for me to understand and be aware of my own consuming behavior in order to change that in the next step. At this point, my camera refused to cooperate with me, so there is a little jump. But I basically just wrote out the header for my notes section, so I just like to have a lot of space for notes. So here you see the completion of my finance tracker with the different categories: foods, groceries, coffee, transportation, other, and some space on the left hand side to calculate my overall expenses and weigh them against my monthly income. The next pages are dedicated to the weeks of April. And for my February setup, I started with a Dutch door system that I actually liked a lot while using it, so I just stick to it. And that's the nice thing about the bullet journal, right? You find something that works well for you, or you try out something. If it works well, you stick to it as long as it works well. If it doesn't, you just discard it and try out something new. After cutting the Dutch doors, I divide each page into 3 sections so that one entire spread is for one entire week. I also like to divide my days into notes and to-dos. And I don't know if it comes out well on camera, but the little blue arrow says to do on it. Because I want to stick to the font that I started this April setup with, I also wrote out the headers of each weekday myself. Typically, I would rather use stickers for that because that would be faster and still look nice. But for the setup, I wanted to achieve a certain consistency and style. Then I put down some stickers to visually divide the notes and the to-do sections of each day. Add a few decorations, as well as the Sunday headers, one last stamp, and then the dates of the days before we come to the final flip through. I hope you enjoyed the second episode of my little series. If you did, show me so with a like. Please share your thoughts on my financial spread in the comments and share the ways how you use the bullet journal for financial organization. If you like my content, subscribe. And please stay home if possible. Show solidarity, be safe, and stay healthy.